Imagine the joy that comes with motherhood. Consider the challenges couples endure having babies. One can feel the height and the depth of the joy in the hearts of couples who have waited patiently to have their own babies. If this is you, then you will certainly appreciate the significant contributions of Professor Oladapo Ashiru, who pioneered IVF in Sub-Saharan Africa. Welcome to Amazing Africans. I'm Susan Ilian. In ancient African settings, women without children are considered unfortunate and so suffer a different level of stigmatization, discrimination, and ostracization. In Africa, children are seen as one of the strongest adhesion that helps cement a lasting marital relationship. The quest for many children is due to the need for cheap or perhaps free labor on farmlands, since farming was the mainstay of their economy then. But with modernity, not much has changed. The culture still expects that a woman must have at least a child of her own. More often than not, the woman still takes the blame for all infertility challenges, but things are changing. Knowing what the needs are and the challenges to meet them too, waiting for help to come someday was not an option for Professor Oladapo Ashiru. He, with a colleague, took the bull by the horns in addressing infertility challenges using in vitro fertilization, otherwise called IVF. Some would rather describe IVF as the marriage of medicine and technology. The effort started in 1983, and by 1984, they had made remarkable progress, helping a woman to get pregnant.
This is the Department of Anatomy of the College of Medicine of the University of Lagos. This is where everything started about IVF. This is the genesis of IVF. It started here in this building. So if you come through, you can see that was the first research laboratory that we started at the College of Medicine in 1980, March, when I returned from the University of Nebraska in the USA.
At this facility within the Lagos University Teaching Hospital was where the concept of IVF was given flesh in Nigeria and, of course, in Sub-Saharan Africa. That, amidst the trouble that comes with startups, about 40 years later, some of the equipment are still in shape, while some other have given way to advancements in technology.
Welcome. All right.
Although the beginning was rough for the branch of medicine believed to be relatively new, it nonetheless was not a bad outing when compared with what was obtainable in other places, particularly in the case of the process that gave birth to the world's first IVF baby, Louise Brown, who was 45 years old last July. In 1984, which was a year after Nigeria's first attempt at assisted reproduction, and 6 years after the Louise Brown success, Nigeria had her first IVF pregnancy, which would later abort after 8 weeks. But with persistence, the first baby later came in 1989, generally referred to then as the birth of hope. The boy then, now 34 years old, weighed 2.5 kilograms at birth, bringing joy to his 34-year-old mother, as well as his father, after 9 years of marriage.
We had this pregnancy that continued and resulted in a live baby. In March 1989, the baby was born. The woman got pregnant, attended the antenatal at Luthier, and then she traveled, as many people were doing in those days. And that is how that baby became a reality. After that, we had other successes.
Whatever success IVF has recorded in Nigeria, not everyone is a convert. Some would rather attribute the success to a miracle. But whoever the success is ascribed to, is insignificant to this woman who had to wait for 10 years after marriage without a child.
I got married 10 years ago, 2010 to be precise, November, I think. Yeah. And after about 2 years, we started to get worried. It stopped being enjoyment and fun to what's actually going on here, you know. So I went to see various consultants. They couldn't really point out what the issues were, basically. What they were pointing out were not enough, to impede pregnancy, but it just wasn't happening. Then I tried 4 years into it. We went for IVF in a center in VI. I did IVF, it failed. I did 2 rounds basically of treatment with them, and they both failed.
It's a similar challenge for 56-year-old Ronke Onadeko.
I kind of like just got carried away with my career over the years, and I was one of those who didn't get married early. I took, leave from relationships, and then I met somebody, and we started trying to have kids, and it wasn't happening naturally. And for me, when I'm going after something, I go after it with every option that I think is ethical that I can. So, I was open to medical intervention. I was open to spiritual intervention because I was praying about it. I was taking advice from a lot of people who had been on the journey. I kept in touch with a lot of women who had been on the fertility journey, and a few people had successes. And I had delved into the options they had used. So I had looked at medical intervention when it comes to Nigeria, the UK, the US, different options. And at some point in time, I had traveled, had all my tests done. I had looked at surrogacy. I had looked at IVF for myself. I'd looked at adoption. It didn't really appeal to me personally, but it was one of the options that I know is available because I really believe that as a woman, if you want to have children, it's something that you should really look at every single option that's available.
But maybe because the woman is more accessible, that's what I will put it. It's easier to walk up to a woman who is under pressure culturally and administer advice or ask what the issues are than to walk up to her husband to start asking those questions. So first of all, the way the society is structured, I don't know if there's much we can do about that. But yeah, the woman is seen as the cause. But in my case, there wasn't much of that in my conversations. I don't know whether, of course, behind me, maybe those conversations will have happened. Most likely they would have, but to my face, not really. But naturally, from the whole process of conception, most times it's more tilted to the woman's ability either to produce good eggs or to carry the child to term. That's the way God designed it. So maybe that's why it looks like the woman is usually pinpointed, sometimes wrongly, as the issue in the society.
In Nigeria, approximately 20,000 couples turn to IVF procedure annually, and so far more than 15,000 children have been born throughout the intervention. That's according to the International Conference on Fertility and Reproductive Health.
The patient has been cleaned up, and you can take what you want to take from that area. And you can see the image there. Those are the expanded follicles. And then she is going to give me the probe, and you can see the needle that we use to aspirate. And she oils the probe with the thing, and it's the probe that enables us to see the follicles like that. And once we go in, you can see now, once we aspirate, you'll see in a minute how the Now the needle goes into the patient and we are aspirating, you can show, and it goes into that container. You can see how the follicle is dropping into the container. So those are the follicles. She's going to clip that and take that to the lab. Pass that to the patient, to the lab. And so that is this stage, and we continue like this until all the follicles are emptied. So when is that? We remove this, we hand over the needle to the patient, and then you find out that the follicles have all been completed. This takes about 20 minutes. You can see here in the lab, we'll be asking them how many eggs have they isolated, and they tell you maybe 10 eggs or 12 eggs. And you now go into the lab to see how they do. So this is where the follicles are being identified. So she puts them in this and she layers them, and you see that they always kept at this temperature constantly. We have an incubator here. You can now see this hood compared to the one we used in the 1980s, right? This is now being improvised, and the whole room is like a laminar hood, because if you look at your back, you see all the things that are sterilizing the room completely. And then, so the eggs are identified. The already isolated eggs that are ready will be taken out. That's a micro incubator at this stage, and it's now going into the micro manipulator. All these processes are documented and they are recorded. Now, come and take a look. Now, this is already advanced stage of the fertilization. This is a blastocyst, and you could see we are biopsying those cells from that blastocyst, one after the other. And this that biopsy is sent for pre-implantation genetic testing to know whether, you can see them, those are the blastomere cells, about 6 of them to 5, that will be taken out and stored frozen. And that is now sent for analysis in the lab. And then whatever is left is now frozen until stage of biopsy. The embryos are kept now in a more advanced incubator. Take a look at them. We have about 4 of them. I think this is what we call the tabletop, and this is this type. You can open it. You can see the modified form, the new improved form of incubators now, compared to what you saw before. They now have closed individual chambers, and they now go there and they are layered in that area. This is at 5.6 up to 6% CO2, and the temperature has to be at 37 degrees. You can see. And it records it. Now this is 36.8 because she just opened it and will stabilize, but it should not be less than 36.6 degrees. And you can see the amount of CO2, 5.2. That is like what happens in the body. So those are the various stages in IVF. The patient on the table, under conscious sedation, the follicles are aspirated out. They land onto this laminar hood, which is the first station in the lab, where they look inside those fluids to pick out the eggs. Stage by stage like that. Once the eggs are picked out, they rest in this area for 30 minutes. Then they are out to be removed. They remove the shell outside that covering the egg. They now pass them to this stage where the sperm, which has been pre-washed, are now injected into the eggs.
The high rise of demand for IVF procedure in Nigeria, experts say, is due to an equal rise in the number of married couples suffering from infertility, which is hinged on urbanization, pollution, stress, and lifestyle. But there may be more.
The remaining 40% is from in the environment. What we inhale, what touches our skin, or what we put on our body, like women who use cosmetics that are not neutral, that have some talc, and all those serious cosmetics, or pesticides. All those things that are there like that, they are the ones that make man to be ill. So, Mayor Center recognizes that man must go through such level of toxins in their body. So it is now at Mayor Center that you are cleaned out of those toxins that you have acquired over the year.
Perhaps consumers of fruit smoothies may take this as a shocker.
But what do many people do? They make a smoothie of watermelon, pineapple, a pear, oranges. They make a smoothie and they fill a glass like this, full of these smoothies. This glass, normally, if you ask these people, how much cubes of sugar do you put in a cup of tea? They will tell you 1. But a glass of smoothies that fill this place contains about 10 cubes of sugar. When they get to realize that, then they don't take it. Water is more purifying to the body than all that.
Consumption of certain foods, particularly those Nigerians call swallow, is another alluded cause. Swallow in Nigeria refers to such foods as pounded yam, fufu, eba, tuwo, amala, semo, and more. Like the name, these foods are swallowed rather than masticulated, a process believed to begin digestion. The consumption pattern of such food, therefore, is said to delay digestion for up to 20 days, causing protruded belly, which Nigerians refer to as pot belly, and may result in infertility over a long time of practice.
When you eat swallow and you don't chew your food and you eat it every day, the food that you eat like that will stay in your intestine for up to 20 days. Can you believe it? That the food you ate 20 days ago are still in the intestine. Because you are eating swallow, you don't chew it, and the body cannot process it. So it just retains in the intestine to ferment and produce toxins in the body.
Through his bold step, as well as the contribution of other notable Nigerians, the country now sits gallantly among the nations doing amazingly well in IVF practice.
We started from 1983, 84, started treating patients. Many people went abroad because Nigerians don't believe that we blacks can do anything. So they did not trust their own people. So they traveled abroad to go through IVF. Even some of our own doctors, our own colleagues, they did not believe that we could do this. But we continued and we persevered.
We then had a problem that when we were doing it, it was still like a research project. There was no problem. We were using our own money, our resources to ensure that the project was done. But once you had succeeded, there was nothing to prove anymore. You have shown that you can do it, yes. So the teaching hospital, and at that time, the government hospitals did not have any arrangement that will allow us to charge the patients for IVF.
One of the facilities Professor Ashiru uses for the assisted reproduction is the Mart Life Center, where he serves as the medical director.
When we became successful, it gave a green light for other doctors to come into the field.
As at the last count, Nigeria has over 300 practitioners of IVF and about 135 IVF clinics in different parts of the country, with Lagos and Abuja housing most of these centers.
I have a friend, she's Ivorian, she lives in Ivory Coast, she'd lived in Nigeria before, she wants to know if she can come to Nigeria to do it. So Nigeria is a good place to come for IVF treatment, even from anywhere in the world, I would say. They're good, they're just as good, if not better than most of the medical doctors. And they're Nigerians like you, they know what our peculiarities are and you know how our lifestyle is. So they're a bit more sensitive to our cultural and spiritual dispensations when it comes to waiting on the Lord for the fruit of the womb.
In Africa, the pain of childlessness could rather be imagined than experienced.
It was affecting my emotional health. It was quite a turbulent period in terms of the pressure that we were both under, especially me, self-inflicted. It's not like anybody was putting me under pressure, but you know, 5 years, 6 years, nothing is happening. 7 years into marriage, we saw a surgeon who said, let's rule out the impact of fibroids, because I had very little, 3 centimeter fibroids. It didn't need a surgery on the face of it, but we had tried other things, so why not? I had the surgery 2017, still nothing. This is after trying other alternative treatments as well, like all these Chinese, European supplements and all that are in the market today. Apparently, maybe they were even doing more harm than good, who knows? But nothing was happening.
All that would give way to the joy that came with motherhood.
I tell women, you know, I have women call me from all over. I have a Nigerian in Australia, some in England, some in America that have come to Nigeria, used the clinic I used and whatnot. I talk about it all the time because the joy of motherhood is, you know, you just can't even express it. After I had my son, I thought there's nothing that could even bring me more joy, that I just had used up all the joy and the love I had. And then the girls came and I found out that I even had even more to give.
I didn't know I was capable of loving another person the way I love my son. I just be staring. I'm not sleeping. He's crying and I'm like, please, what is it? You know, he's sleeping, I'm staring at him. I can't even sleep. And my mom keeps saying, look, when he's sleeping, you should sleep. Don't worry, he's fine. Relax, rest.
One of Professor Ashiru's strategies of addressing serious infertility cases is making his patients go through detoxification at Mart Life Detox Clinic.
It's a German technology to remove toxins from.
Besides his exploits on the field of medicine, Professor Ashiru also puts himself on the global map, becoming the youngest professor of medicine in the whole of the African continent at the tender age of 32 years. He took over from previous holders like Professor Oladapo Ashiru, born 1933, and was appointed professor in 1968 at age 35 years, and Professor Benjamin Oshuntokun, born 1935, and appointed in 1970 at age 35 years, both men from the University of Ibadan. He also became Nigeria's first professor and head of anatomy, a feat he started even as an undergraduate.
The head of anatomy then, he said that, in fact, Professor Mudin, he said that Nigerians can't study anatomy. They don't have enough mental capacity to study anatomy. So can you imagine that being said to the pioneer provosts and vice who are trying to set up all the various departments so that they can replace them with Nigerians, because they were all set up by foreigners from America, from Britain. So they are replacing all these staff gradually, department by department, by Nigerians, apart from anatomy. So when I studied anatomy, I not only became the only anatomist in Nigeria, I now produce so many anatomies, so that if you now go to that department, you will see that I produced about 25 graduates in anatomy, and almost 12 of them are professors.
Ademola Oremosu was one of Professor Ashiru's former students. He now himself is a professor of anatomy.
I'm proud to say that one of the beautiful things about Professor Oladapo Ashiru is that products from here, we've been able to recommend them to him, and he's even given them employment. So we are not just training people and not making use of them. So apart from his own practice, even in industry, many of them have found places in various assisted reproductive labs and practices where they're working. So it's something that gives us joy that we continue on that stead, and we're producing manpower for the economy.
For most experts, IVF is the marriage of medicine and technology. And the intervention and curiosity of Professor Ashiru and Emeritus Professor Giwa Osagi changed the narrative in addressing fertility in Africa, having been the first in Sub-Saharan Africa. According to research, the global IVF market is estimated at $25 billion as at 2022, with the expectation that it will rise to more than $59.45 billion by 2032, at a compound annual growth rate of 9.1% between 2023 and 2032. Perhaps Professor Ashiru's strategy to make Nigeria take a vantage position in that space is to train more hands. Would this be the climax for him? Is he satisfied with what it is now?
Ultimately, the beautiful thing is that science has so advanced now that the take-home baby rate has much improved. And I want to say that in Prof's practice, it's almost as high as whatever they get in any other part of the world.
So far, more than 3,000 children have been birthed in Professor Ashiru's facility, and more than 15,000 children across the country. He still keeps in touch with the beneficiary families, insisting that there's no difference between naturally conceived children and those through IVF. Except that IVF babies may be saved the trouble of repeating unwholesome genes from their parents, and also saved from having HIV if any of the parents has it. In 2005, Professor Ashiru received a national award as the member of the Order of the Niger. He's married with children and loves to keep fit. As he marches on in his quest to bring joy to many homes, one can only keep fingers crossed for a greater future which his innovative mind portends. I trust you enjoyed this episode. Let's have your feedback. Do you know any fellow Africans doing incredible things on the continent? If so, let us know by using the address showing on your screen. See you next time when we bring you the next amazing African. I'm Susan Ilian. Bye for now.